What is going on, guys? We are back and we are here to talk about the bird, the turkey, the phoenix, the ho-oh. Now, it's very common when you think of restricted formats, when you hear of a mon like ho-oh, dialga, giratina, you're really immediately writing them off. I mean, of course you would. When you see these massive powerhouses that we get with Calyrex Ice, Calyrex Shadow, Koraidon, Miraidon, teams do well with Terrapagos, Zamazenta even now because of body press, and even if a duo restricted like Regulation I, Zacian gets better along with Lunala, who was already doing really well towards the end of Regulation G. I wouldn't really even come close to thinking about running a mon like Ho-Oh when I see all of these restricteds. And this would previously be confirmed in other restricted formats that we saw like in Gen 8. I mean, Ho-Oh was used more of like a niche mon for like fun, in my opinion. I remember I ran something with it with one of my friends where we were running like Wakanberry Ho-Oh or Weakness Policy Ho-Oh with screens, and it was just a massive tank, and it is. And that's why I think it's actually very good, because when we have a Terra format, there's a lot of different ways that Ho-Oh can be used, and I think we're going to go over some of those ways to enable Ho-Oh on top of supporting its partner and its team in a dual restricted format in Scarlet and Violet with Terra. So one of the teams that I wanted to go over, or builds for Ho-Oh, was a team that we saw do decently well in the VR. Beth, or Giovanni Panarello, did very well with this team. I actually faced this comp and saw it from a friend that faced it as well, and he essentially had Terra Fire Ho-Oh, and he paired it with Koraidon, and I thought this was super interesting because Koraidon with Life Orb and Clear Amulet Ho-Oh basically means you're putting on two major physically offensive threats that really don't care about Intimidate, because we all know, as seeing Life Orb Koraidon do Life Orb Koraidon things, it can just nuke things even still with a Life Orb even after being intimidated. And with the Clear Amulet, the Ho-Oh is now enabled in Sun, that boosted by the Koraidon, for the Koraidon to kind of just like sit there, pick up a big knockout, and the Ho-Oh to come in and hit the partner as well. And along with Terra Fire on both of these guys, they're both just massive offensive threats in Sun, especially this Koraidon. And not having the Terra is really nice because it allows you to have the coverage of, all right, I can pick whoever I want to Terra and go from there, which is really nice in a format like this, where it allows your team to be a lot more flexible with their Terra and with your Ho-Oh. So Koraidon was usually seen with Flame Charge with Life Orb, but Beth decided to do it with Dragon Claw, which I thought was really interesting. And the reason why I would say he did that was because he had Tailwind and Icy Wind from Focus Sash Flutter. Another pair that went really well when you're getting the speed boost, and obviously putting super fast offensive pressure with a mon like Flutter, as we all know. It having the Shadow Ball allow you to have coverage and pressure into opposing CSR, opposing Koraidons, and then having the speed control for the Icy Wind, enabling the Ho-Oh, the Koraidon, and even the other partners that Beth decided to add, which was a Rillaboom for grassy terrain, which gave you terrain control on top of pivoting potential with the Goons. And yes, the Goons are Incineroar and Rillaboom together. You could run Safety Goggles Rillaboom on this and Rocky Helmet, in my opinion, on a team like this. I think it's a toss-up. For Beth, it was Safety Goggles. He also did Terra Water. I think the Terra is very much a preference type of thing. I think for a team like this, since you're not too scared of Zamazenta, since you pressure it so much with Ho-Oh and Koraidon, you could afford to go with a defensive Terra like this that is not like Bug or Fairy to resist fighting. But I think Rocky Helmet also isn't bad, since you can't run AV Ensign, which, by the way, I think AV Ensign is insane in this format. But Ensign is a good mon in general in this format. This Ensign could run both stab moves, since you're putting up the Sun with it. It enables it to have a lot of damage output and have a lot of more fire type mons that are being massive threats to your opponent's board and their teams. And having these double pivot guys allowed your team to be able to cycle in your Ho as Regenerator and use it very well. And I really like that. And then you're getting that nice little priority element that every team kind of wants. And Bev did something really interesting I never considered, because I always call this the walking fraud, but he had Mystic Water Walking Wake with Terra Water, which was really sick. I'm assuming it was speed boost, but it could have been special attack boost as well, since you have Icy Wind and Tailwind. It was really cool to see, but the reason why I think it was speed boost is because Beth had teched on Snarl on this, and Snarl is very, very, very good if you're trying to put pressure into opposing CSR and kind of forcing it to Terra or just damage mitigate all these special attackers that are doing well in the format, like Lunala, even Miraidon if you want to put yourself in that position. But you also pressure the Miraidon to Terra and threatening it with Fluttermane and Koraidon. It's pretty nice to have a mon like Walking Wake so that you also can do big damage with the Hydra's team with Terra Water in the sun. Never got to play this team, but I did on paper like how it looked together, and the synergy of the Ho-Oh with the Koraidon was really sick with the Protomons that they had paired with them, on top of having the Rillaboom and the Incineroar. I'm never usually a fan of having Rillaboom in Sun, but I think on Beth's team it made a lot of sense. There is definitely cases to be made. If I would make changes to the team, I would probably make the Incineroar or maybe a Chi-Yu, maybe drop Walking Wake for Raging Bolt so that you have a better matchup into Kyogre, even though Koraidon is naturally usually good into Kyogre, and since you have Rillaboom for that. But I think having Chi-Yu is an amazing dark type to make CSR a little bit easier for yourself, so you don't have to really rely on these two, and you could just do it in one mon with Chi-Yu. It kind of like carries the weight of having that threat, another fast Choice Scarf Chi-Yu with the fire offense, Beads of Ruin enabling the Fluttermane, and having the dark typing to run a tech move like Snarl on top of it. It could create another slot where you could probably flex something on there like a Raging Bolt, so that you don't have to be always reliant on Rillaboom to come into Kyogre teams, but still maintaining that massive threat and getting a mon that benefits a Proto Boost and the Beads of Ruin boost. Now, the next Ho-Oh build that I think really is pretty good into this format obviously is the Terra Grass one. Terra Grass obviously provides a defensive Terra that allows you to get out of the weaknesses of water and electric that can be very common right now with things like Raging Bolt and Urshifu being relevant in the format. But you probably would still run the same moveset as like Beth did on his team. Think Sacred Fire, Brave Bird, Tailwind, not Teleport, Protect. Is very good on a mon like this still, even on any other comp for the most part. I think it does like have like moves like Recover, which could be cute and quirky on like a different team maybe, but for this, I think for right now at the beginning of this format, I think this type of Ho-Oh set is really, really nice, super strong. And the other pairing of a restricted I thought that would be really good with it was Miraidon. I saw something interesting about the synergy between Ho-Oh and Miraidon when a friend of mine, shout out to Will Tank, reached out to me at the very beginning of this format, and he really was trying to make Ho-Oh work with Miraidon, and he immediately went to Iron Hands, which obviously is a great Miraidon partner. There's one Iron Hands has won Worlds twice in Generation 9 and has always done really well with Miraidon, and has always done well in Generation 9 since we got it into this game. And it's just super tanky with the Assault Vest and pairs very well with the Quirk Drive. Now it actually has an ability that it can use with Miraidon, providing Wild Charge, Low Kick, and Drain Punch coverage with Fake Out. It just gives you that nice utility, and pairing with the Miraidon, I think we obviously would do the standard choice specs set with Electro Drift, Volt Switch, Dazzle, and Draco. Just keeping it very simple, nothing really to get fancy with here. I think Terra Water is objectively good so that you have ways to operate inside of Trick Room against mons like CIR, which gives this team a bit of a problem to put a threat onto the Miraidon. But with Ho-Oh, you do pressure the opposing CIR to Terra and obviously Sacred Fire Burn, which is really nice. And if they set up Trick Room, your Iron Hands, if it's 0 speed, it is speed tying if it's min speed CIR, but a lot of them have like some speed on them. So it's nice to have that enabled for you, and with the electric terrain, doing a lot of big damage. On top of that, another common partner is kind of like similar to what we saw previously in Reg G with Arabega team, is the Electricity. Now, when Will approached me with this, I think Will had originally had Water Pawn and he had Landorus. Now, when I saw this team, I was just like, man, I don't know about the Water Pawn. Never been a Water Pawn believer post Reg D or E and F? Yeah, past Regulation F, I think Water Pawn's a very weird mon to play. Now that we have more Sun abusers with Koraidon being enabled in the format with the restricteds. So I thought it was super weird to see in a format like this. Not that it's impossible to use. It definitely has its utility when you see a team like this. I think like Swordfish can be a little bit awkward with Zacian Kyogre, but I don't know if Ogerpon has the oomph to be able to deal with that. And then when I saw Lando, I was like, yeah, I kind of like having Lando on it, but I don't know if it's the right ground type. So me and we were talking, and I just like immediately suggested, hey, why don't you put Iron Treads on this? We saw it do well with EUIC, with Dylan getting second with it. And you could still run a Choice Band or a Life Orb. Personally, I'm a big Choice Band fan on Treads, and I would probably drop Ogerpon Water. And something I was messing around with after playing this format and seeing it do kind of decent and making sense on this team was Urshifu Dark. So the reason why I thought Urshifu Dark was one, because I'm not gonna lie, I saw it and I faced it and I was like, this is interesting. But the person that I played against had Rock Slide on the Treads, and I wasn't too keen on that, but I get like why they had it. And even some people have gone like with Terra Ground, which is super cool. Not my cup of tea, but hey, if it floats your boat, go right ahead and test it and see how you like it and let me know. And some people would run Steel Roller, High Horsepower, EQ, Rock Slide, or Iron Head. Treads definitely has 5 Move Syndrome with this set, but it is super nice when being boosted with the electric terrain. That you're able to abuse and outspeed stuff and put massive threats into the mirror when you have to go up against opposing Miraidon. And along with that, you're threatening things like opposing CIR and CSR with Steel Roller, since it's massive damage with output with Choice Band and having Helping Hand from the Farigiraf. It definitely gives this team a lot of utility into a lot of different things that I really liked. And then having that Tailwind and Trick Room mode with Tail Room gives you positions that you get to put yourself in where you're enabled to set up Tailwind on the last turn of Trick Room or set up Trick Room on the last turn of Tailwind. And it's really cool to dominate in a board state against your opponent when you're having a Pokemon like a Regenerator Ho-Oh that's so bulky, taking so many hits, and a Volt Switch pivoting Mon that it is now having a ground immunity that Miraidon usually didn't have before in previous Regulation G with Ho-Oh, and just constantly recovering and pivoting and having like 3 really bulky tanky Mons with Hands for Rig and Ho-Oh with a semi-bulky restricted, but it's really meant to be a powerhouse. And along with the Iron Treads and the Urshifu, it definitely created a dynamic that I thought was really cool for synergizing with the team, because some of the other restricted pairs that are pretty uncommon but are also kind of threatening to be respected were CSR Pagos, Terra Pagos, Koraidon, and even Lunala Miraidon. So having Dark Urshifu with a Sash allows you to be a little bit more of a threat for the team to deal with things like Lunala, being able to punch through screens teams that come up with opposing Miraidons on them, or even pressuring the opposing Terrapagos if you can't put yourself in a position when they're running with CSR and you want to save your hands for later to deal with the Pagos. Threatening the CSRs, putting them in bad spots overall, while still having that nice immunity with the Farigiraf being a normal and psychic type for immune to Astro Barrages, and still having that good old psychic fighting dark coverage that you would want with a team like this, and still maintaining like big momentum with the offense, which is really sick. I think I wouldn't change much about this team. I flirted with the idea of dropping one of these for potentially like Iron Bundle. I just didn't ever test it out, but let me know if you want to try it and see how it does in the comment section below. I think it could be really cool because of how much like I dislike speed ties in this format. Iron Bundle not being that like used and getting that quirk boost from Miraidon, you could in theory drop Urshifu and slap an Encore onto the bundle so that you have ways of dealing with mons I like to set up like Terrapagos. But I think having a boost energy could be in theory better because most CSR Pagos teams have Rillaboom, so when you lose that terrain control, then your bundle is just immediately slower than the CSR, you're getting outpaced. So you got to be mindful of that when you're playing it if you try to do bundle. So that's why I never really tested it, because I didn't want to really try to sit there and think about the spreads that I would want to try to have bundle in, because it's not very bulky on the especially defensive side. But objectively, it could be a good deterrent into opposing Sun teams when they have Flutter Mane, or other teams that have like choice Scarf Mons like Chi-Yu, and then having the bundle be big with the Quirk Drive to just outspeed and then Icy Wind, knockout, Icy Wind, knockout. But if you do something like that, you probably would have to go Tim and Miraidon, which I also was just like, I do see the value in that team composition. But I think with a team like this, if you're running these 6, you really want your Miraidon to hit as hard as possible. But you could get away with a bulkier Miraidon with a lot of offense with Modest, and changing it out to kind of like be outpacing Ogrepons at 180, at Torn and Ogrepons at max speed, their max speed at 180, covering for both 179 and 178 speed stat. Or you can go just completely slower and just rely on you being bulky with your Miraidon to live, or have rolls to live close combat from Life Orb Koraidon, and being able to have slow pivots and still being able to abuse both Tailwind and Trick Room when you know you're the slower Miraidon, which could potentially work on a team like this, but still up in the air about what I think could be the best one so far. Now let's go on to the third build. Now into my third build, to no surprise, we got Clear Amulet. And we still kept the Sacred Fire, Brave Bird, Terra Grasp, Tailwind, and Protect. Reason being is because we're going to look at a version of Miraidon that is built around with screens. Now, like Clay, obviously with Grimmsnarl, in this format, I think screens is really busted. As we saw with Renya Sun in Generation 8, we saw how crazy it was to have a screen setter that was always going to get up 1 or 2 light screens and having speed control with Thunder Wave. Spirit Break and Foul Play is a toss-up. I personally like Spirit Break to force CSRs into awkward positions, since Grimmsnarl is a very good mon into CSR, and it having the utility to set up the screens for it makes bulky mon like Ho that has a really natural bulk have just an insane amount of longevity on the field. Now you could still pair it with the same restricted duo that we went previously with Miraidon and still do the choice specs and go for the same movesets that we are commonly seeing, and also doing Iron Hands. But these 4 don't have to necessarily be the 4 core that you need to do to get this off. I think Miraidon probably still is one of the stronger pairings to do if you want to do it with screens, but I think there is a way where you could also, in theory, get rid of Iron Hands and put something like Incineroar on the team. And I've seen people go with having Farigiraf still to have the fake out blockers, but also having the Intimidate, which is really nice because you could go the Assault Vest route on the Incineroar, which I think is very strong right now in this metagame, and this Incineroar would just be not as offensive as an Iron Hands, yes, but it would definitely be a big nuisance to like spam, Intimidate, pivot, break sashes, and be able to put yourself in a position where you're now giving yourself bulk for these 3 mons to sit there and be menaces on the field and set up Tailwind or set up Trick Room later on, so that you could run them on like Ursaluna. Now I think Ursaluna Hisui is very interesting on a team like this, and probably has remnants to some comps that I've seen already. There's also the idea of going with like kind of like what Joe did with his Regulation G team, where you have bulky hands, Miraidon, Grimmsnarl with screens, and a Sash Ditto. And Ditto is very still good as it's going to be in a restricted format because of you're able to copy a mon like Zacian or Zamazenta to copy their boost and getting another boost on top of their current attack boost, or the defense boost. So this is a very interesting core that could come up and be good. The only thing I have issues with Ditto is obviously the same issue I said previously in this format that is always going to be seen, and that is going for speed ties whenever you copy something when you run a mon like this with a focus sash. But I still think it is strong, don't get me wrong, because you could like T-wave in positions if they're not like dark types or dark terras with your Grimmsnarl, so now your Ditto can outspeed them as you come in and copy, which is really sick. But it's definitely going to be something that you have to be mindful of how you're positioning your board state for whatever you want to copy the Ditto with. But I do think the idea of Joe's team with Ho-Oh, Miraidon, Hands, Grimmsnarl, and Ditto, or any other pairing that could go on this team, I've even seen shout out to Chris Large. I've played him quite a bit on Showdown, where he's running it with Choice Bandit, Iron Boulder, and it's actually really sick. It's super annoying and it's super strong. Mighty Cleave's obviously an amazing signature move that they gave to Iron Boulder, being able to hit through Protect with a rock move. A lot of people just kind of forget that what this thing even does, or doesn't even know what it does, even at this point in the metagame, because it's not that popular of a mon. And it has a really cool toolkit. And Chris ran like Sacred Sword, Megahorn, Zen Headbutt, and I thought this was a really sick set to run. And it has like some really good like special bulk if you break it down here, and then overall like an amazing speed stat where you're getting the speed boost and still hitting like insanely hard with a choice band, kind of like how Iron Treads operated. But this is just way faster and a lot more threatening to mons like Koraidon, putting them in awkward positions and also opposing Ho-Ohs if you face any. I've never seen it with screens. I know Chris had it with like Whimsicott, and I believe it was Firepon, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong. But I do think this is a pretty sick combination that you could have together with Iron Boulder and maybe not Grimmsnarl. It could be something else. But this idea of having Iron Boulder with screens or with just priority Prankster Tailwind is kind of sick. So yeah, we went over these 3 builds. Let me know what you think about Ho-Oh if you're a Ho-Oh believer, and let me know if you think there's a better duo restricted pairing very well with Ho-Oh that could be even better than the 3 that we went over today. Shout out to the players that created some of these builds that I kind of just like picked off and went off with their ideas from me playing against them on Showdown. I think Ho-Oh is a very amazing restricted and in a really good spot right now, and I am very keen to see how it does as we go even further into the Regulation I meta as it just begins. So let me know in the comment section below how you think, and if you like this video, please go ahead, drop a like, comment, and subscribe. Appreciate it. See you guys in the next one. Peace.